player in Carolina basketball history that I've got to watch, and just was really a joy to watch over his 4 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, just everything that you said there exactly, shows the reason why he was on mine. I put him at point guard because that's just where I felt he was a little more dominant. But I mean, you can interchange those two guys as much as you want. I mean, those are two very, very good players in Carolina history, and that's why Marcus Page is my shooting guard. Just really focusing on some of the other things for Joel Berry. I mean, playing as good as he did in that Final Four, being named the most outstanding player of the Final Four on 2 bad ankles was phenomenal. Scored over 20 points in both games. Just you can't say enough about him. And then for Marcus Page, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a guy like you said. You were under the NCAA cloud, and this was the guy that led you through all of that. And he did it from his freshman year. And granted, his freshman year didn't start out great, but we always talk about where we sort of started to fall in love with Marcus Page's game, and that was in the ACC tournament as a freshman. And he just took over from there. He became, at the active leader in 3-point shots made in Carolina history. That's the reason that I would probably use him at the 2 guard. But again, you can interchange those guys, have them bring the ball up if you wanted to in this hypothetical basketball game that we would be playing. But there was so much that he could do. And yeah, he had his moments later on in his career where he struggled a little bit from the field at times. But when he needed to get it together, he always found a way to put the team on his back and lead them when he needed to. And, to me, it kind of culminates with, you got the article up online. It culminates with the shot that he hit in the national championship game. That is just a shot that, let's be real honest. You look at this year's team, they can't hit with, no one on their side of the court. Marcus Page hits that shot because he's just a guy that found ways to will in the basketball whenever he needed to. It was just phenomenal how great of a player he was. And to me, it's pretty heartbreaking that he's not in the NBA because it would be so fun to watch him night in and night out again.
Yeah. One guy that is in the NBA, and it was the guy that I listed as my small forward, I ultimately went with Justin Jackson. You had the whole Harrison Barnes, maybe Reggie Bullock fits that mold there, or maybe even Theo Pinson more recently. I went with J-Jax. This is a guy that came in as a top 10 recruit. We all kind of thought he'd be a one-and-done kind of player with that kind of Heraldton coming out of high school. It didn't pan out for him. He had to stay in school and develop, and boy, did he develop. This is a guy that struggled with his three-point shot as a freshman, but by the time he left as a junior, before we had Cam Johnson, he was the most automatic guy that we'd ever had from 3, really since the early days of the Roy Williams era. This is a guy that could fill up the bucket, was shooting over 40% from 3, had unlimited range. His floater was one of the more unstoppable parts of his game that he pretty much had perfected as a young freshman. And look, still accomplished a whole lot, was a big part of that team's run to the 2016 National Championship game. Comes back in 2017, what does he do? ACC Player of the Year, first team All-American, was a big part of that run to the 2017 final, and all of that hard work got him a first-round selection of the Kings. He's now a big part of what the Dallas Mavs are doing, one of the more upstart teams in the NBA, and this was just a guy that we've always said that Roy Williams is a guy that can develop talent. And even though Justin Jackson came in as a top 10 recruit, Roy Williams developed him into a All-ACC, All-American caliber player in 3 years.
Yeah, this was probably the toughest back and forth that I had because Justin Jackson, what he did, all around, just a great player that, developed not only his 3-point range that you were really expecting him to develop coming in, his mid-range jump shot, his floater was as good as we have seen in a long time. And again, part of that national championship team, an extremely key part of that national championship team. Remember, the year before really was one of the reasons why Carolina wasn't able to pull out the championship because he just didn't really play all that well in that 2016 Final Four. And now national championship game. So comes back. I mean, look, named ACC Player of the Year in 2017. He's pretty much all you got to say. That's why I'm going to go with him over Cam Johnson. But the thing about Cam Johnson is by the time that he finished up at Carolina, I mean, the progression that he made from the minute that he stepped on campus to the final time that he put on that Carolina uniform as a senior. And you got to remember, he came in as a junior. So, I mean, he did it in basically a year and a half because he also had the knee injury that kept him out for some time. This guy became arguably got to be the best three-point shooter since the turn of the decade, since the turn of
the millennium.
Millennium. Yeah, there we go.
The century.
I think, you look at just how efficient he was for that team last year and how dominant he was. I mean, we would die to have him on this team this year because he was a guy that could make just about any shot that he looked at.
Yeah.
But I think just because of the fact that Jackson had a little more of that mid-range game. That's why I would go with Jackson. But this was the hardest one for me because I feel like, everybody, when they looked at this, automatically thought, okay, Justin Jackson is the pick. But when you start to look at Cam Johnson more and more, you look and say, okay, this is a little bit closer than we probably at once thought. But I'll lean with Justin Jackson, but it's really, really close.
Yeah, it probably doesn't hurt in Justin Jackson's argument here that he ACC Player of the Year, played in 2 Final Fours, and cut down the nets, and that does weigh.
Well, okay, here's the question that I have for that argument. Do you think that if Zion Williamson is not in the ACC last year, Cam Johnson could win Player of the Year? I think he would have had a really, really good case. They gave it to Zion, and pretty much rightfully so, because let's be real honest. He was, we hated all the coverage that he got because it just got too much. He was a very legitimate basketball player. I think if he was not at Duke, there is a chance that he ends up winning Player of the Year last year.
Yeah, there's an argument. You could still make the argument, even though Zion, was on that team. Cam Johnson was maybe more important to what Carolina was doing than Zion because that Duke team had all that young, blissful talent that we heard about way back in the summer when they had their own ESPN show that then we heard about during every game. But, it didn't happen. Cam's still one of those guys that even though he only played 2 years, didn't even commit to Carolina coming out of high school, we still one of the more beloved Tar Heels in recent memory just because, just how good he was. And like you said, the automaticness from three. I don't even know if that's even a word. I might have just made up a new word. It was, in like NCAA 2K8 level where we just every time he pulled up, I thought it was going in. We got accustomed to him seeing, and the range was just. I'd love to watch him and Justin Jackson have a range shootout because they both could fill it up from deep, and that's something that that would be a little fun debate. So moving on, power forward, we've gotten a lot of responses on Twitter with a certain guy. And the guy, deserves to be on there. I went with John Henson.
Right.
And this is a guy that, came out his freshman year, didn't play a whole lot, was really a guy that was going to be a developmental piece for years to come. And his sophomore and junior years were just spectacular. He was ACC Defensive Player of the Year 2011, 2012. It was a guy that could rebound the ball at a high rate, could block shots. His offensive game developed, really anchored him in the inside with Tyler Zeller on the inside. For those two teams, 2011, 2012, both teams won the ACC regular season, and both teams made the regional final in the NCAA tournament. And I think he's just been kind of overlooked because he was never really flashy, but he was just a consistent guy that was going to give you 10 to 15 points, 8 to 10 rebounds. And you made the argument about how we would die to have a guy that can make some shots. He was a guy that we knew was going to protect the rim. And what's been the biggest part for Carolina in the last couple years?
On the defensive end.
Their inability to protect the rim.
Yep.
We never had any worries if Kendall Marshall got blown by on the perimeter because John Henson was there to clean it up.
Yeah, we have not had a strong rim protector probably since Meeks left, and we have had nothing that has been anywhere close to the same as what John Henson was. And I'm going to agree with you. I would put him at power forward because I want some defense on this team. You know, my team, I've got 3 guys that are going to score the rock, no problem. I need a guy inside that's going to shut some guys down. This is the best interior defender that Carolina has had. I'm not going to say ever because I haven't gone, you know, I'm not a guy that goes back and has seen every game from the 1950s on. But he's got to be up there because every time that you went to the basket, you knew that you were going to have a chance of seeing John Henson with a block. Like you said, it gave you a little bit of comfort that if your guards did get blown by on occasion, you would have a guy there that was able to take that away. And, I mean, that's just something that you just haven't had really since. And, I mean, to win ACC Defensive Player back-to-back years is phenomenal. And that's something that, you know, Roy Williams, if there's one thing that he's received a lot of criticism for throughout his career, especially from Tar Heel fans themselves, it's been the fact that his defenses have never really been great. John Henson was that one guy that no matter what, he always showed up and was defense first. He had nights where he would score on the offensive end, but you knew every single night that he came onto the court, he was there to play defense. And that was something that was just so huge for the Tar Heels. And you know, when you look back on him, I think he's one of those guys that if we were to do, you know, we were talking about it in the offseason, maybe we get around to it this offseason. If you want to talk about underappreciated players, I mean, John Henson has to be somewhere near the top. I mean, this guy, he's a first-round pick, and he's a guy that is never talked about, or if he is talked about, he's talked about as a guy that, you know, you would think came off the bench, not a guy that started and won Defensive Player of the Year back-to-back years.
Yeah, no, it really does kind of get forgot about, and a lot of that's because of who his running mate was, and that was Tyler Zeller, and he's my center that I would put on my starting 5. So the guy that, you know, won a national title in 2009. Of course, you know, it was the year he broke his wrist, missed a lot of action, came back. Of course, the 2010 year was a disastrous year for Carolina basketball and all in general. Came back for his junior and senior seasons and just phenomenal. Scored over 15 points per game and shot over 54% from the field as a senior. Or that was as a junior. As a senior, he scored over 17 points per game, was ACC Player of the Year in 2012. So Carolina had the 2012 Defensive Player of the Year in John Henson, the 2012 ACC Player of the Year in Tyler Zeller, was a first-team All-ACC, second-team All-American, was always very good academically, and was just a guy that was quiet about his business, but was a solid 15 to 17 point scorer, 8 to 8 rebounds a night. In my opinion, the best runner of the floor this team has had since Tyler Hansbrough days were early in the previous decade, and that's how he got a lot of his points. Were just Kendall Marshall run ahead or pitch aheads to him running the floor because he's beating his man to the basket. And you know, he's gone on to have a solid NBA career, just doing the little things that he does well. And that's the thing I think when you look at John Henson and Tyler Zeller as in your post, they did the little things that we kind of at the time we took it for granted.
Right.
But they were willing to get dirty. Well, those Carolina teams, they didn't run like we, when I first got in with Ty Lawson, and then like last year we just got done watching Kobe White. Those teams ran.
Yeah.
Those Carolina teams scored over 80. And that was playing a more half-court style of basketball, but those teams were built to play that. Well, if you can play half-court when you got 2 guys on the interior that are willing to do the work and be good aggressive rebounders and do all the stuff that's necessary and do it defensively as well. So, there was some discussion here with Kennedy Meeks. I thought if I went Kennedy Meeks, I showed a little bit more emotion there because he won a national championship, had the block that kind of ended the game against Gonzaga.
Right.
Because I thought Tyler Zeller was kind of the clear choice here.
Okay, well, this is where I'm going to disagree with you here. I am going to go with it is an offensive guy as well. I'm going to go with Bryce Johnson here. I think that, putting him with, you got the rim protector in Henson, and then you go with a guy in Bryce Johnson who, you talked about Tyler Zeller, being a guy that quietly did things. That wasn't what Bryce Johnson did. Bryce Johnson was the other way around. And I like the aggressive mind